Dad texted me, "Don't expect help," during my graduation. I was already a billionaire. He just didn't know yet. My phone buzzed at exactly the wrong moment. I was standing in the staging tunnel beneath the Kresge Auditorium, wearing a robe that cost $47 to rent and heels that had already eaten through both of my pinky toes. The tunnel smelled like old carpet and nervous sweat. Around me, 300 MIT graduates were fidgeting with their caps, rehearsing handshakes, texting families who'd flown in from 5 different continents. My family had flown in from New Jersey. My father, George Thompson, third-generation builder, man of concrete and steel, and unshakable certainty about what was real and what wasn't, was sitting in seat C7 in the front row. I had booked that seat myself. I had paid for his flight, his hotel, the dinner reservation at Oleana afterward. I had planned this moment the way I planned everything, carefully, precisely, down to the last detail. And then my phone buzzed. I looked down, his name on my screen, his number, and beneath it, 11 words that hit me like a fist to the sternum. "Don't expect any help from me going forward. You're on your own." I read it twice, then a third time. The graduate next to me, a mechanical engineering PhD I later found out, asked if I was okay. I must have made a sound without realizing it. Something involuntary, something that came up from somewhere deep. "Fine," I said. "I'm fine." My hands were not shaking. I want to be precise about that. My hands were completely still because I had learned over the previous 6 years how to hold myself together in moments where lesser versions of me would have shattered. But behind my sternum, something had gone very, very quiet. I thought about the 12-year-old girl who had sat in her father's study with a laptop trying to explain what she was building. The 16-year-old who had begged him to just look at what she was doing. The 18-year-old who had carried a 20-page business plan in her bag and left with it unread. That girl wanted to cry. I was no longer that girl. My phone buzzed again. Different contact, Lena, and the next 4 minutes changed everything. Let me back up, because to understand what happened on that stage, you need to understand what happened before it. You need to understand George Thompson and what it meant to be his daughter. My father built things. That was the core truth of him, the thing that organized every other fact about who he was. He'd grown up watching his father pour concrete in the New Jersey heat, and then he'd done the same. And then he'd turned that into Thompson Construction Group, a mid-sized firm that had put up strip malls, dealerships, municipal buildings, and eventually, his crowning achievement, the thing he mentioned in every conversation, a stadium expansion outside of Philadelphia. Real things, things you could touch, things you could point at from a car window and say, "I built that." He had 2 sons before he had me. Mark came first, then David, and by the time I arrived, the Thompson family mythology was already fully formed. The boys got tool belts at 5, summer jobs at 16, long weekends on job sites learning to read blueprints before they could read novels. My father spoke about this with the reverence other men reserved for scripture. "You know what's wrong with this country?" he'd say. Every Thanksgiving, every 4th of July, every time the news annoyed him. "Nobody builds anything anymore. Everyone's just moving money around. Everyone's got an app." He'd say the word app like it was a minor disease. Mark became the car dealership king of Bergen County. David opened gyms. Both of them, in their own ways, built things you could touch. My father loved them with a simplicity and totality I found both beautiful and slightly suffocating to witness. Then there was me. I was interested in systems, invisible ones. I was 12 when I wrote my first script, 14 when I found my first security vulnerability in our school district's network, found it, documented it, reported it to the IT director, who looked at me with your bewilderment and then quietly patched it without ever saying thank you. I was 16 when I built a basic intrusion detection prototype that my computer science teacher, a tired man named Mr. Calloway, who I will always be grateful for, told me was genuinely impressive and the kind of thing they do in graduate programs. My father thought it was a phase. "Smart girl," he'd say. "You'll figure out what you actually want to do." He wasn't cruel about it. That's the thing people always get wrong when I tell this story. They expect the villain to be cartoonish, snarling, obvious. My father was none of those things. He was warm and funny and could fix anything mechanical and remembered every birthday and coached David's little league team for 6 years. He loved me. He just loved me the way you love a beautiful painting that doesn't quite fit any wall in your house. The night of the study, I was 18, early acceptance to MIT already in my pocket, business plan printed and spiral bound in my bag. I sat in the leather chair across from his desk, and I watched him slide 2 cream envelopes across the mahogany, the kind of envelopes that feel substantial, that have weight. "Mark's got the second dealership opening in April," he said. "David's looking at 3 more locations up in Connecticut. Big year for both of them." I nodded. I was waiting for my envelope. "I've been thinking about what makes sense for you." He leaned back, laced his fingers, did the thing he did when he was about to say something he'd decided was generous. "Your brothers are going to need someone. Someone on the financial side. Someone brilliant they can trust completely." He smiled. "That's you, Mila. You've always been the smartest one." I said very carefully, "I have a business plan. I know you have ideas. It's 20 pages. Market research, revenue projections, threat modeling. I've identified a gap in mid-market cybersecurity infrastructure that nobody is. Tech is a bubble," he said, gently, firmly, the way you explain gravity to a child. "These things come and go. And cybersecurity, Mila, there are 1,000 companies doing that already. Big ones. Companies with resources you can't compete with. The big ones aren't solving the problem I'm solving." He looked at me, and in his eyes I saw something that was worse than contempt, worse than dismissal, pity. "The desk will always be you waiting?" he said. "Whenever you're ready." I stood up, picked up my bag with the 20 unread pages inside it, and walked out of the room. He called after me, something warm and placating that I didn't process. I didn't look back. I made a decision in that hallway, at 18 years old, that I would not tell him a single thing about what I built until I had built it all the way, until there was nothing left to dismiss, nothing left to minimize, nothing he could look at and call a bubble or a hobby or a little computer project. He would find out the same way the rest of the world did. MIT was not what the brochures suggest. I want to be honest about that because the story sounds clean from the outside, and it was not clean. It was 4 hours of sleep on a good night. It was ramen for 5 consecutive days during a stretch in my sophomore year when a financial aid reprocessing error left me short $340 and too proud to call home. It was waitressing weekend doubles at a restaurant in Cambridge where the manager called me sweetheart, and the tips were unpredictable, and my feet hurt so badly by midnight that I'd sit in the walk-in cooler for 3 minutes between rushes just to feel something numbing. My father called every week. He was consistent about that. I'll give him that. "How's the little computer project?" he'd ask. "Good, Dad. Mark just opened the second dealership. Did I tell you? Big ribbon cutting? The mayor came? You told me. That's great. David's gyms are doing incredible numbers. He hired a whole marketing team. That's wonderful. You sure you don't want to come home for a bit? There's always a place for you here." I'd look out my window at the Boston skyline, at the city that was slowly, painfully teaching me everything it knew. "I'm fine, Dad. I'll talk to you next week." Data Halo started as a thesis project. It became something else. The core insight was this: mid-sized companies, the ones doing between 50 and 500 million in annual revenue, were being absolutely annihilated by ransomware and data breaches because they were too big for consumer security tools and too small to afford enterprise solutions. They were falling through a very expensive gap. I built an adaptive threat detection platform specifically architected for that gap, lightweight enough to deploy without a dedicated security team, smart enough to learn behavioral baselines and flag anomalies in real time. I believed in it the way I had never believed in anything. The VC rejections came fast. 10 meetings in 8 months, each one leaving a different shaped bruise. One man, silver-haired and tan in the way of someone who winters somewhere warm, actually leaned back in his chair and said, "Little lady, do yourself a favor. Go work somewhere for 5 years, learn the ropes, then come back." I made it to the elevator before I started crying. I made it to the sidewalk before I couldn't breathe. I sat down on the wet concrete in the rain outside his building on Boylston Street, and I cried with my knees pulled up and my laptop bag in my lap for approximately 11 minutes. Then I got angry. Good angry. The kind that doesn't cloud your thinking, the kind that sharpens it. I went back inside, asked the receptionist for a business card, and sent the man a handwritten note the following week thanking him for his time. 12 months later, when the first version of Data Halo had its pilot results, I sent him a second note. He never responded. I didn't need him to. I met Lena at a networking event I almost skipped because I had a morning shift at 6 a.m., and standing in a hotel ballroom drinking cheap wine seemed like a luxury I couldn't afford. Lena Park walked directly up to me within 4 minutes of my arrival, looked at my name tag and said, "You're the MIT thesis project, Data Halo. That's me. Your business model is going to fail." She said it with the same tone a doctor uses to tell you something is broken. Clinical, not unkind. "But your tech is genuinely brilliant. You're underpricing the enterprise tier by about 40%, and your go-to-market sequence is backward." I stared at her. "I'm a CFO," she said. "I've been watching this space for 3 years. Can I buy you a drink and explain what I think you're doing wrong?" Lena Park, formerly CFO at a Series C logistics startup, 6-figure salary, genuinely excellent health insurance. She quit it all 8 weeks later. We worked out of a windowless office in Kendall Square that had previously been a supply closet. I know this because there were still shelf brackets on the walls when we moved in. We drank coffee by the pot and argued about pricing models and channel strategy, and I slept on a futon I bought off Craigslist and kept folded in the corner. When we pitched together, investors looked at me when I talked about technology and looked at the wall when Lena talked about financials. One man, in a conference room in San Francisco, leaned back with the particular smirk of someone who is performing confidence for an invisible audience and said, "So the little lady who builds the code and the numbers girl think they can crack $1 billion industry?" Lena didn't flinch, didn't blink, set down her coffee cup with a small, precise click. "The question," she said, "isn't whether we can crack this industry. The question is whether you're smart enough to get in before we make you obsolete." We didn't get his check. We got something better. Her name was Dr. Patricia Voss, PhD in Operational Risk Management, 22 years in enterprise logistics. She was the chief operating officer of Northath Logistics, privately held, $4 billion in annual revenue, moving freight up and down the eastern seaboard and across into Canada. Northath had been hit by a ransomware attack 8 months prior. $4. $3 million in recovery costs. 11 days of operational disruption. Dr. Voss was not interested in being hit again. She gave us a 30-day pilot. Their regional operations hub in Baltimore. 47 endpoints. Full access, full logging, strict zero-incident benchmark. Lena and I did not sleep for a month. I mean that in the way that sounds like hyperbole, but is actually precise. I averaged 3 hours and 40 minutes a night. Tracked it on my phone, still have the screenshots. We ate delivery food and drank cold coffee, and I wrote more code in those 30 days than I had in the previous year combined. 0 security incidents, 0 anomalies that reached a threat threshold. The system flagged 17 suspicious access patterns in the first 2 weeks. 3 of them turned out to be a terminated employee's credentials still active in a third-party vendor portal. That discovery alone saved them from a potential breach with an estimated remediation cost of $800,000. Dr. Voss sent us a signed letter of intent for a company-wide North American contract before the pilot officially ended. We scaled. We hired. We raised our Series A from a firm that had previously said no. They called us that time, which is a feeling I recommend. We moved out of the supply closet into an actual office with windows and a coffee machine that made espresso and a conference room where Lena once laughed so hard at a bad pitch that she cried. We crossed 50 employees, then 100, then 211. Our valuation at Series B was $400 million. I turned 26. I never told my father a single word. Not when the Boston Globe ran a profile of Boston's most promising cybersecurity startups. Not when Forbes listed me on their 30 under 30 in enterprise technology. Not when the IPO paperwork was filed with the SEC, a document of extraordinary beautiful tedium that contained my name approximately 800 times. I called him every week, asked about Mark's dealerships, heard about David's gyms, said I was fine. I sent him a graduation invitation 6 weeks before the ceremony. His name printed formally on heavy cardstock. 2 first-class flights, him and my stepmother Carol. She's lovely, Carol. Blameless in all of this. 4 nights at the Charles Hotel. Front row seats reserved. I wanted him there. That part is important. People ask me if it was a trap, and the answer is more complicated than that. I wanted him there because somewhere underneath all of it, I was still the girl who had sat in his study with 20 pages of hope in her bag. I wanted him to see it. I just also, I will be honest, wanted him to see it publicly. The staging tunnel had a monitor showing the live feed from the auditorium. I could see the rows. I could see seat C7. My father was looking at his phone. Then he looked up, straight at the camera, straight at what I realized now was approximately my direction, and he smiled. The way you smile when you've made a decision you feel good about. The way you smile when you think you've closed something. I looked at his text again. Don't expect any help from me going forward. You're on your own. 6 years of silence. 6 years of I'm fine, Dad. 6 years of swallowing the thing I was building so he couldn't reach it with his dismissal. And this was his move. Send the message at the moment of maximum vulnerability. Watch her receive it from a seat I reserved. Smile. My phone buzzed. Lena. I don't know why I answered. Instinct, maybe. Or maybe some part of me knew. Mila. Her voice was shaking in a way I had never heard in 4 years of partnership. Lena Park did not shake. She had once calmly continued a board presentation while a fire alarm was going off. The IPO priced. The market opened 20 minutes ago. Mila, there was noise behind her. A lot of noise. Something that sounded like people cheering. It's soaring. It's really soaring. My mouth was very dry. Tell me the number, Lena. The noise behind her spiked. Something crashed. Someone knocked something over. I found out later it was a champagne glass. We'd set up a watch party in the new conference room. We crossed 1.3 billion. She was crying. Lena Park was crying. Mila, you're a unicorn CEO. You did it. We did it. Mila Thompson. My name. Through the speakers. Into the tunnel. Into my chest. I pressed the phone to my ear one more time. I have to go get my diploma. She laughed through the tears. Go, go. I straightened my cap. I walked out of the tunnel. Into the light. Here is what I want you to understand about that walk. It was 43 steps from the edge of the staging area to the center of the stage. I counted them later, because I had nothing to do for 3 weeks after the IPO closed, except answer emails and count things I should have been present for. 43 steps across a stage I had almost not made it to, not because of grades or aptitude, but because ramen and waitressing and 4-hour nights and 10 slammed doors had nearly broken something in me that I worked very hard to keep intact. The auditorium held around 2,000 people. Faculty, families, photographers, a local news crew doing a segment on the graduating class. The dean was at the podium. The university president was seated to his left. I don't remember most of it. What I remember is my father's face. He was looking at his phone when I stepped onto the stage. I could see him from 43 steps away. Front row, center, the seat I had bought him. His face was white, not pale, white. The color of something that has had the blood completely evacuated from it. His jaw was slightly open. Carol beside him was watching the stage with a kind smile, dabbing her eyes the way people do at graduations, moved by the general ceremony of the thing. She hadn't seen it yet. She was just proud of her stepdaughter. My father looked like a man watching a building he was certain was empty suddenly light up, floor by floor, from the inside. He looked up slowly, the way you look up when the news is too large to process through peripheral vision, when your whole face needs to be aimed at the thing. Our eyes met. I was holding my diploma. The dean had shaken my hand, Dr. Martin Adler, PhD, 31 years at MIT, wonderful handshake, and said my name again into the microphone for the people in the back rows. I stood in the center of that stage. 2,000 people, the local news camera, the photographer whose photos would run in the MIT Tech and 2 Boston publications, and eventually a Wall Street Journal piece about the IPO that my publicist would later tell me generated more web traffic than any profile they'd run that quarter. I looked at my father, and I smiled. The exact smile. The one he'd given me in the tunnel 4 minutes ago, from his phone, from 10 feet away. The one he'd given me in his study 8 years ago when he told me the desk would always be waiting. The one that said, I know something you don't yet. He understood immediately. I could see it land hand, the recognition, the arithmetic of the moment. His daughter's name on a diploma, his daughter's name in the market news on his phone, his daughter's face, on a stage he had come to observe, looking back at him with the kind of peace you only have when you have nothing left to prove. The man who had refused to give $1 to my dream, who had offered me a bookkeeper's desk when I asked for a chance, who had spent 6 years asking about my little computer project, was sitting in a seat I had paid for, in a row I had reserved, in a city I had chosen, watching the world learn my name. I did not confront him at dinner. I want to be clear about that because people always ask, hoping for a scene, a table flip, a speech. There was no scene. I didn't need one. We went to Oleana, my reservation, my credit card. Carol hugged me for a long time. My father hugged me too, eventually, after a silence that lasted just long enough to be uncomfortable. He smelled like the same cologne he'd worn my entire life, cedar and something faintly chemical, and standing in that embrace I felt something complicated that I don't have a clean word for. Not forgiveness, not its absence either. He didn't mention the text. Not once. Not the IPO. Not the number. He talked about Mark's dealerships. He talked about David's gym expansion into Delaware. He ate his lamb and drank his wine and complimented the decor and was, in every way, the warm and socially capable man he had always been. Carol squeezed my hand under the table at one point and looked at me with an expression I took to mean, I know, I see it, I'm sorry. I squeezed back. At the end of dinner, when the check came, and he made no move toward it, another detail I noted, I signed it and stood up and said I was tired and needed to be at the office early. On your graduation night, Carol said. We're a public company now, I said. There's always something. My father stood up when I stood up, looked at me for a moment across the table. His face was doing something difficult, the same thing it did when he was about to apologize, which he did rarely, and always too briefly. Mila, he said. Dad, I picked up my jacket. The flights home are taken care of. The hotel's through Sunday if you want to stay and see the city. I didn't know, he said. He stopped. I didn't know what you were building. I looked at him for a moment. At this man I had loved my entire life, and who had loved me back in the only shape he knew how, at the gap between those two facts. Yes, you did, I said. You just didn't believe it was real. I left him with that. The Wall Street Journal ran the full profile 11 days after the IPO. The headline was, Data Halo's Mila Thompson, the CEO who built a billion-dollar company in silence. The journalist, a woman named Rachel Chen, who spent 4 hours interviewing me over 2 sessions, had found the MIT graduation through a news photographer's wire image. Me on the stage, diploma in hand, expression described in the caption as serene. The piece ran 3,800 words. It included our revenue figures, the NorthPath contract origin story, the supply closet office, the 10 VC rejections. It quoted Dr. Patricia Voss of NorthPath. Mila Thompson solved a problem that the entire industry had decided wasn't worth solving. She was right and they were wrong. It quoted Lena. She is the most disciplined person I have ever worked with, and I have worked with a lot of very disciplined people. It mentioned in the 6th paragraph that Thompson had received no family financial support in building the company, that she had worked her way through MIT on waitressing wages and self-funded the earliest stages of Data Halo. It did not name my father. It didn't need to. He texted me the day after it ran. Proud of you. 3 words. After everything. I held my phone for a long time, sitting at my desk on the 22nd floor of our new headquarters in the seaport, looking at the Boston Harbor, the same city that had taught me everything. The same city where I'd sat on wet concrete outside a VC's building and cried until I found the anger underneath. I typed back, "Thank you, Dad." Then I put my phone down and went back to work. That was 2 years ago. Data Halo now employs 640 people. We secured contracts with 4 Fortune 100 companies in the last 18 months. We acquired a smaller competitor in Austin and are in talks, I can't say more than that, with a European firm that would make us a genuinely global operation. Lena Park was named one of Fortune's most powerful women in finance last spring. I sent her flowers and a note that said, "Still think your business model is going to fail." She sent back a single-word reply, "Obviously." Dr. Patricia Voss joined our board of directors last year. She is one of the sharpest people in any room she enters, and I am a better CEO for having her across the table from me. My father and I talk on the phone most Sundays. He asks about the company. He asks real questions now. Not how's the little computer project, but how's the European expansion going, and what does a Series D secondary market look like? He's been learning. I don't know what exactly prompted it. I choose to believe it was genuine rather than strategic, because the alternative is a kind of bitterness I don't have time for. The desk in his study, the one he said would always be waiting, is Mark's now. Mark handles the books for the Thompson Construction Group, and from what my brothers tell me, he's genuinely good at it. I never did need a desk. The week the journal profile ran, I got a message through LinkedIn from the silver-haired VC who had told me to get a job first, learn the ropes. He wanted to connect. He thought there might be synergies worth exploring. I accepted the connection request, left the message unread. Some things don't require a response. They just require you to have done the work. People ask me when I give talks, at business schools, at tech conferences, at the occasional women's leadership summit that I always feel slightly fraudulent at, because I am, at heart, still someone who ate a lot of ramen and cried on a wet sidewalk. People ask me what kept me going. I tell them about the anger, the good kind, the sharpening kind. But what I don't always say, because it's harder to say in front of 200 people on a conference stage, is this. The text my father sent me from 10 feet away in that staging tunnel was the most honest thing thing he had ever communicated to me. He meant it as a closing, a door swinging shut. You made your choice, now live with it. But closing doors, I have found, create extraordinary pressure. And pressure, if you've built the right architecture to contain it, doesn't destroy you. It just makes everything more clear. I walked across that stage with $1.3 billion of proof that I had been right and he had been wrong. And the thing I felt in that moment was not triumph. It wasn't vindication exactly, though there was some of that. Mostly what I felt was quiet. The kind of quiet that comes after 6 years of being so loud, internally, invisibly, in the only place where it counted, that everything external just stops mattering as much as it used to. I smiled at my father from that stage the way he once smiled at me, and then I went back to building. That's what we do. That's all we've ever done.